What's good, everybody? It's your boy Malik Washington. How you all doing this fine day or evening, wherever you all reside? I hope that you all are well and that you're doing whatever you can to succeed in everything that you do. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go on ahead and start on this topic. Heat of warning. This is probably one of my more controversial videos, simply because, once again, this is another one that is pertaining to a situation where a white person says something that a black person disagrees with. So this one might definitely get a lot of flack because of my perspective on it and how I am analyzing it, as some of you will disagree and some of you will agree. And I welcome disagreement and I welcome having a conversation with you. But once again, as I reiterate, I will not tolerate disrespect. And if you do disrespect me, I will try to reason with you. But if you can't be reasoned with, I won't try to kiss your ass and try to get you to have an understanding with me. If you're deliberately looking to be confrontational, not going to have it. And quite frankly, not going to continue speaking to you. But more power to you and more power to whatever ideology or radical belief it is that you have in this world. You got to live it for yourself. I don't have to live it for you. And we all got to live this life. Life is short. And quite frankly, we all need to try to live for ourselves as well as others around us who care about us as we care for them. And quite frankly, I am not the person that you need to be sitting here arguing with. As we're both adults, we both can have a conversation. We both can disagree. And yeah, I'm not looking to sit here and try to tell you all how you should think, only for you to think for yourselves. And if you come in with your perspectives, hey, it is what it is. I enjoy hearing you all give your perspectives on it. But one thing we're not going to do is throw ad hominems, as this one may render ad hominems because some of us in our communities tend to let our tongues loose. And we like to say things about people that aren't entirely true. And some of us can often say things in a very ignorant and uneducated manner to the point to where we say things and then the meaning is entirely different from what your context is of that word you threw out there about this person. But you're going to understand what I'm saying as I go along in this video, because I'm going to tell you exactly what it is and what's currently going on. So without further ado, I'd like to go on ahead and get started, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I haven't really watched this YouTuber for a long time. She's someone I recently subscribed to within the past, give or take, 4 or 5 months ago. Her name is, as many of you know her because she has millions of subscribers. But for those of you who don't, her YouTube channel name is Just Pearly Things. I'm sure you all know exactly who that is as soon as I mention her. Some people in my inner circle know exactly who she is because she often references dating, relationships, the male perspective on how they view, women, people, the whole nine, right? Pearly Things niche is typically predicated towards men and advocating for the male perspective because it is not often rendered out here for men to be heard. It's often rendered for the women to be heard as opposed to the men. And she's one of the women who, I guess in the sense of the word, she's pro-male. So she's just basically defending the male perspective and putting it out there of how men think when they look at the things that women do, what they say, how they go about thinking about relationships, how they go about handling situations, and basically based off of the men that she knew, that she grew up with in her life, and men that she's known all throughout, the course of her history and dealing with men, black or white, indifference. She's basically projecting their perspective on her platform. And so she has all of these different individuals that come on her show. For the most part, you'll see majority black and you'll see like maybe a few whites here and there. And there's a reason for that, but we'll get into it as I go along in this video. But basically, she's advocating for the male perspective, putting it out there because men don't really have that much of a voice when it comes to media. And when men do typically project their voices, men are typically either shut down or their masculinity gets, you could say, downplayed in the sense of the word, right? Now, That isn't to say that all men think the same. That isn't to say that all men's masculinity isn't the same, but there is an overwhelming depiction or idea of what a man could be, or how a man should act, or how a man should carry themselves as they go on through this life. So that's what Just Pearly Things is about, or so we believe. Now, not so long ago, I want to say yesterday, she went a little bit, it was kind of different. Actually, she did this interview, I think like maybe like a week or so ago, with this young guy, a white guy. I think he's like 27 years old, around my age or better. He goes by the name Nick Fuentes. For those who don't know who Nick Fuentes is a podcaster. He goes into a variation of things related to the politics in America, this country, the people in it, you name it. It's often been assumed. Matter of fact, if you want to look him up, you can obviously go on Wikipedia. There's a whole Wikipedia page about this man. He's been alleged to be a white supremacist, a white racist, a white nationalist, clearly because he has some very, some would say, radical talking points, especially around the subject of about immigration. He is anti-immigration to a certain extent, and there are reasons for that. But I would recommend, if anyone wants to know why he is considered these things, go on to a channel called the No Jumper Podcast, which is where I heard some of his talking points. Because the guy who hosted, he actually asked him multiple questions as to why are you being considered all these different things, and he asked him all these different questions surrounding the some of the talking points that he's often made on his own podcast, and why he got shut down for that very reason. Surrounding black people, immigrants, all these different things. And based on some of those talking points, they are what actually gave him the notoriety of being a white supremacist, right? And so that was a conflict in and of itself, because Pearly Things brought Nick Fuentes onto her podcast. She said that, just similar to the guy from No Jumper, she basically said the same thing. She said, well, there are certain things that you are labeled as because of some of your talking points, some of the things that you said, and I have been labeled some of those same things. And so I want to know, based off certain topics that they had, why did he think the way that he thought, right? And so with that being said, I want to address that first point, because I have about 3 other points that I want to go into as far as why Pearly Things was considered a racist, right? Amongst black people, because again, this is another situation where black people are now blowing up. They're fueled up. They're ready to throw the torches, and get out the pitchforks, because white woman comes along and she's saying certain things that they don't agree with. And I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack for it, because I have a certain perspective that's quite different, but hey, it is what it is. So first things first, the first thing they got on Pearl about was the fact that she even interviewed a white supremacist in the first place. Now, this is subjective, because some people think that Nick Fuentes isn't a white supremacist. Some people think he is, because in part, they also say he's anti-Semitic. Let me not forget that, because they said he was a Holocaust denier. So he has very strong beliefs. Some may even consider it to be radical. And so when she invited him on her show, a lot of people found that to be offensive, because they're like, that this man is known to be these things, and yet you're going to invite him on your show. But I find that to be quite disingenuous, because in the world that we live in today, if you look at, and I want to use this as an anecdote, if you look at the news promotes good stories. The news promotes bad stories. Some stories, and all stories, they try to look at, they're supposed to, but they don't do this anymore, because there's an agenda out here and they're promoting propaganda. And I think it's on both sides, if you ask me. But everyone must decide for themselves, based on whatever information they're given. They're supposed to go do the research, and then they're supposed to come up with their own conclusions. That's how I look at it in times like these. Nonetheless, news agencies are supposed to report the news. Doesn't matter what their opinion is, doesn't matter how they feel about it. They are supposed to objectively disseminate information to the people so that the people can decipher for themselves what is right or wrong about this dynamic. They're paid to do that, right? When they interview people, regardless of how the reporter feels about the person they're interviewing, they are supposed to ask the questions that the people want to know about why this person thinks that they think. Doesn't matter what their background is, doesn't matter what the color of their skin is. It's about their position and why they think how they think. Quite a few networks have interviewed people who have been racist. They've interviewed people who are extremists. They have interviewed people who were presidents. They have interviewed people who are celebrities. Within these groups, they have interviewed people who were murderers. They have interviewed people who were pedophiles. They have interviewed people who were thieves. They have interviewed people who are liars, commit espionage, corporate espionage, you name it. They have interviewed people who are of various different backgrounds. So what makes the difference? And I'm just saying this for Pearl as well. What makes the difference between a news agency reporting the news on certain individuals and understanding why these groups feel the way that they feel, and Pearly Things interviewing someone who too is controversial and has differences of opinions about immigration, black people, or the politics in America? What makes them both any different? Outside of the fact that one is a news agency, the other one is simply an individual with a podcast and a mic, having a conversation with one individual who's one man who has many understandings about things that could be slightly what's the word I'm looking for? Slightly confusing, slightly hazy, but at the same time, it's relatively straightforward how he feels about these particular topics. Based off the information he's reading off of, where he's getting the truth about different things from, right? Where is this all stemming from? And so that's why you interview these people. The purpose is to try to understand why they think the way that they think, so the populace can decide for themselves whether if they think he's a racist or a white supremacist. Now, granted, it's not just the left that also doesn't like this guy. There are people on the right who don't like him either. So the guy is basically an outcast by his own right. I don't, I'm sure he has people that are backing him up. But hey, his reputation precedes him. He lives by what he's saying. That's the hill he's dying on. And it is what it is. Now, that was the first thing. And people were getting upset about that.
Motion detected at the front one.
Man, she loves interrupting my streams, my videos. Anyway, point being is that was one of the issues that were problematic. Another one, and I wrote them down. The first point, and I saw the video, I saw the clip that people were putting out there about Pearl. One of the things she said, she was talking about one of her top producers. His name is Blessing, right? She also came out and she apologized about it because the joke was kind of, she considered it to be insensitive, where basically what happened was that Nick was going on about being not being on time. The conversation was about being on time. And so Nick actually was referencing how him being an Italian, he follows the beat of his own drum when it comes to time. He said the only time that I'm typically not on time is when I'm not supposed to be there. So in so many words, if someone gives an appointed time, he comes earlier than the time appointed. And so they were making jokes surrounding that. And then Pearl comes out and she says, well, you're not, she said, you're not as bad as Blessing, African. And that's literally the way it was quoted. It was kind of strange the way it was quoted. So I had to listen to it like 2 or 3 times to actually get what was being said here. And so Nick then responds in kind, and this is what got them both in trouble. He was like, yeah, because he's black. And it was just like listening to it. A lot of people took it like, oh, so she's just basically going to sit up here and just talk shit about this black person that's her producer in front of him and basically talk and make this racial stereotype about him being late. Now, granted, Pearl came out a little later after the video was, spreading like wildfire. And basically she She apologized. She said that she felt like what she had said was insensitive and that it shouldn't have been said in that context. If I'm not mistaken, and I have to go back and look at the video because I saw the whole thing, but like bits and pieces of it are escaping me. But if I'm correct, she did say somewhere along the lines there was a joke that was being referenced in relation to to Africans, that Africans make themselves. They call it African time. All races have these little jokes here and there about being late, being on time, or not being on time. It's just like even with black people, we do the same thing. Black people, in which I don't know why we get upset about these things because it's so double standardish to me. We joke about black people being late all the time. I have relatives who do the same shit that say that they will be here and they're never here. If they do come, it's every once in a blue moon. They actually might live by the words that they say. For the most part, they don't. If you say that that you're around the corner, for the most part, they're 10 minutes from your house. They're not actually around the corner. And then when you confront them about it, and you say, I thought you said you was around the corner. Yeah, I was around the corner. I'm about to pull up. And you're just like, no, you wasn't. It took you 10 minutes to get here. What the hell you mean that, you were around the corner? Bro, you probably was just getting up, putting your clothes on, and just now heading out the house, as far as I know. But you expect me to sit here and believe that you were gonna be on time, exactly like you said you would? No. And like I say, I have quite a few relatives that do that. And I'm certain all of you have certain people in your family who do that same shit. They tell you what they're gonna do. They typically don't do it. They're just not on time people. So you make a joke about shit like that. That has nothing to do with your race, but black people have been known for the most part for always being late. We do it to each other. So I don't see what the problem was when that came up about him being African and being late. Now, some people interpreted it, and again, I understand we all interpret things differently, but some people interpreted that as she was being racist. She was stereotyping. And quite frankly, she was being very insensitive in that very moment, in which she felt herself that she was being this way as well. And she apologized, which I don't know if doing the apology tour was the right thing, because now you're going to have to apologize for a lot of shit now. You apologize for one thing, you're going to apologize for every little thing, probably for even existing. And quite frankly, I don't even think it's just because of the fact that she made a joke about a racial stereotype that even black people project amongst each other. I think it's just simply because what did that girl say on TikTok? Oh, that's right. She's white. Duh, duh, duh. Like, for real, she's white. Go figure. So it stands to reason that, well, if she said that, she's probably gonna get told off, because look at her. She's a white woman. White people can't say shit these days. So quite frankly, if you say something about somebody outside of your own race, yeah, you're bound to get told off. So was it a smart thing to say in that moment? Perhaps not. And again, we all say things not trying to be funny. When we get amongst each other, or if we get amongst our own races, or if we get amongst people who are not of our races, but we're very close to them, I think we all joke and say things that are probably inappropriate at times. Not trying to be funny. Not trying to be funny. When you're close to people, you do start to say some things that society wouldn't accept. And it doesn't have to be racist. It doesn't have to be racist in nature. Just about anything. And some people may say, man, that's out of term. You wild for that, bro. I don't know. Man, I couldn't do it. I couldn't say what you're saying. You crazy for that. And you'd be like, but man, that's bro. Or that's sis. We all do that. And I don't think Pearl is any different in that instance. But again, take it as you will. If you want to say she's racist and that helps you live and go about your day, if that floats your boat, by all means. I think you all are getting upset about I think that's minor. Okay, she said something about black people not being on time, as if we never have seen black people not on time before. Okay, so that's that. The second point, Pearl stated that some things mentioned about slavery were embellished. Now, okay, here we go. This is like the sandwich of the whole thing, the meat of the whole sandwich, right? So they get into a conversation about the Holocaust. This is where people say Nick Fuentes is anti-Semitic because he basically denies some aspects of the Holocaust, saying that some things about it are not as they quite depict it. He believes that some things are an exaggeration. Pearl interpreted by him saying that as an embellishment. And he said she was right. So what ends up happening is Pearl says, and she thinks about it. She says, well, you know what? Now that I think about it, slavery in some capacity is in this same light, because she said some parts of that they say about slavery are embellished. She said not to say that slavery was horrible. It wasn't horrible. It was horrible. She said, but they make it more horrible than it actually is historically. So she then references Roots, which I'm sure a lot of you, if you grew up in the 90s and things like that, you know about the movie Roots. You know about Kunta Kinte.
Motion detected at the front one.
You know about Kunta Kinte. And you know about the story that is projected around him and his descendants as they go throughout slavery, the intricacies and the horrific events of slavery, of the slave experience, and how the slave masters treated them. The producer, who was a black man who directed the film, who produced the film, he came out in an interview and he admitted that some aspects of the movie, or most, if not all of the aspects of the movie, are mythos. Much of it he created as a way for black people to live by it. So in other words, I'm telling you this story and I'm creating embellishments around it because I want you all to learn from this, right? I want you all to live by this. That our ancestors came here to this country as slaves. They were treated horribly as slaves. They fought and survived through slavery in order to get to where we are right now. This is something for you to learn from. This is something for you to always never forget, so that when times come like this again, where you have to fight, because you don't want something like this to ever happen. Not to mention, I think even the guy got sued because that very movie was conceived by a white person, a white guy, in regards to Roots in and of itself. And the guy took it and he made it his own idea without giving credit to the person who actually pioneered the thought of this movie, right? So with that being said, she basically, as some black people will argue, she downplayed it. She downplayed that aspect of slavery and saying that it was basically embellished and it's not as horrible as it seems. Now, some black people were sitting in here saying, how dare you? You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong, because slavery was a horrible thing and you need to be educated because you as a white woman shouldn't be saying shit like this. How dare you? How dare you? How dare you, white woman? Now, here's what I want to say. We have all heard stories before, right? I'm sure we have, since we were children. Our grandparents probably told us stories. Our parents probably told us stories. Aunties and uncles have probably told us stories. And have we not often assumed, sometimes, have we not often assumed that maybe some of the things that our people often say in some of these stories are over-exaggerated, idiomatic, oxymoronic, metaphors and similes, allusions, alluding to things pertaining to real life? Have we not ever seen some of these literary or oral devices that are often spoken of by our people when hearing a story being regaled by them? I'm certain we have. I know I have. Especially amongst black people when they like to talk about fights that they've had. And oh, can they get artsy about fights? They can tell it and they can act it out and everything. They love it. It's like adrenaline for them to talk about them swinging at somebody and somebody swinging back at them. You know, leaning back, coming forward, ducking, uppercutting them, all kinds of shit, right? But imagine You come up with a story about a fight and you say, man, Joe, let me tell you, man, this dude, he came at me so fast. His hands, I mean, he was like, do, 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 do. And it's just like, and I was trying to dodge his shit. And then he hit me so fast, I barely could see it coming. I swear it was like three people. I swear it was like three dudes that was fighting me, man, the way he was swinging. And it's like, dude, you weren't fighting three people. You was only fighting one dude. She was like, yeah, but it was like his hands. His hands were so fast. It was almost like I was fighting three people. And you're like, yeah, exactly. It was like you were fighting three people. You weren't actually fighting three people. You was only fighting one dude. His hands just felt that way. And if you came across a dude that could fight like that, and you survived, man, you cold. That's all I can say. But my point is, in saying that and adding that anecdote, is simply this, people. People embellish things. People over exaggerate stories. They do happen. Some people do do embellish certain parts of slavery. And even like that guy in the movie Roots. Basically, and as Pearl mentioned in her apology video, she believes that they used slavery in today's time to control people mentally about how horrible it was. No one denies slavery was horrible, just like nobody would deny that the Holocaust was horrible. No one would deny that Pearl Harbor was horrible. But facts are the facts. And if I know people who have common sense, and if I know people who are genuine and honest and not crass, they will correct anybody who is in the wrong about something. If they're not telling the full story, if they left parts out or omitted it, if they're not being genuine about how things went down. Imagine if somebody came out and said that Malcolm X was killed by a group of white men, when we know, according to what the sources say, that there was people from his own particular group who actually came and they killed him because of the message that he sent. Whoever lived back in Malcolm X's time and knew what happened during that period, and don't let them have been there, if they were to hear someone say that a group of white men came and killed Malcolm X, somebody's going to say, no, that's not true. Tell the truth. Tell the truth about the story. Don't lie about it. Don't twist it. It wasn't a group of white men. It was a group of black men that did it. The same way when you listen to certain stories on the news and they sit up there and they report the story, but then they exaggerate certain events that happen, certain witnesses will come up and say, you're lying. That's not what happened. That's not what happened. This is what happened. Report it correctly. The same thing with this whole slavery narrative. People, it happens. Embellishments do happen. Nobody's denying that the actual event occurred, but certain things surrounding different aspects of it probably did. Probably were indeed embellishments. Just like with the whole COVID-19 situation, how they inflated the number of COVID deaths that happened, when not everybody that passed away was a result of COVID, but in fact from other people's prior conditions that came prior to them having COVID-19. But everybody's deaths was being considered COVID, as if, man, this thing was just inflated. Like people were just dying on the streets type of deal. So embellishments have the ability to happen. Nobody's saying slavery wasn't horrible. I think everybody who grew up in this age knows that it was terrible, and they don't want it to happen again, with a exceptional few, obviously, who clearly have a disdain for people of color. But hey, ain't shit we can do about it if that's what they feel. It's just they don't have the power to make it happen, and if they did, it's not feasible. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, she was talking about something in which, in part, based off of her argument, it was embellished. And that's the gist on that. Now, there was the third point, and I think it was about Nick Fuentes, because they was having a conversation surrounding immigration, and he was giving his reasons as to why he felt like certain aspects of immigration should not happen, as he felt like it would change the demographic of the country. And by the demographic of the country changing, It would therefore change how the country is ran, right? Also within that conversation, something came up about African immigrants, and they were comparing how African immigrants, when they come to this country, they work harder than some Americans that live here, right? Which I think in part is true. When people from outside of a country come into a country that is not of their own, they typically do work twice as hard, especially if they came from lands of which there was little to no opportunity because of corruption or because they were trying to escape from execution or from persecution. Anything, there could be a drought, anything. Whatever it is that you're struggling with in your own home country, you go to a country where opportunity is nigh. And so that was pretty much the gist of that argument. Basically making the argument that African immigrants work harder than most Americans. Some black people came out and inserted race into it, somehow saying that African immigrants work harder than black Americans, particularly the blacks who are descendants of slaves. Okay. First off, if that were true, then the simple fact remains is black people just have to work harder. It's that simple. You don't have to get upset about it. And it might be true that African immigrants may work harder than black Americans, because you know why? Africans have culture. They have structure. They have people that believe in them. They have people that tell them what they need to do. They are given assignments of what they must do when they come here. They don't come here to play. They come here to put in work. Not to mention they grew up in a different environment than we did. See, a lot of us here in America, when you want to talk about privilege, who were born here, we have plenty of privileges. We have insurances. We have fail safes. In Africa, they don't have in some of their countries, they don't have fail safes. So they have to they have to be on the move. It's like a grind. That's how some people become hustlers. Because if they're at the bottom of the barrel, all you can do is go to the top. But damn, you can sure fall. You can slip. You can make a detour. It can certainly happen. That's why most immigrants, whether they're black or white, they come here, they become successful, they become millionaires. A lot of Nigerians right now dominate the educational field alongside Asians. And that's in part because of how they were raised. They were taught here to come and get their education. And once especially if they're first gens, and when they come here, they take their degrees back to Africa because they couldn't get that degree while they were in Africa, and they make opportunities for their people there. That's typically how that works. So yes, they will work twice as hard as compared to maybe a black person that lives here in America, because we have insurances. It's the very reason why we often recommend a lot of people get off of welfare, because if you become too dependent on welfare, you'll be subjected to stagnation, in which you don't want to do that, because then you never grow. But some people may choose stagnation because they have those insurances. Take welfare away, people are going to be living like the third world countries. They're going to have no choice but to get their asses up and actually work hard to try to be at the top. But sometimes life happens. People get caught up in bad situations and they get thrown at the bottom through no fault of their own. It does happen. But nonetheless, this situation right here, I mean, about, comparing, and I think even later on, Nick even said that Africans were more industrious than black Americans are, and which in part that is true, because Africans do have more businesses. Africans do try to incentivize the things that they work hard towards when they're here. They're not slacking. They're not doing any of that. That's not to say that black Americans don't do that. And that's not to say that there aren't black Americans who don't work hard. There are black Americans who work hard. But let's be honest, amongst our own, we do have people that are lazy. They exist. We have those who are not working as hard as your run-of-the-mill immigrant. That is true. You have some of our people who don't want to work the jobs that the African immigrants will work until they get to where they want to be, and then they get out of that situation. The overwhelming majority of businesses that exist in this country are by immigrants. The most successful are those who are immigrants. It's not really Inborn Americans. It's those who are not born American. Now, of course, you have successful Americans, but the ones who are most known, they're foreigners. The ones who make those top Forbes listings, they're foreigners that got naturalized as Americans because they dwelled here for a certain period of time, but they weren't native born. But the bottom line is, people, facts are facts. Okay, fine. You want to say she's racist? Great. But what does that change? It doesn't change a damn thing. Okay? This is nothing to and to be quite frank with you, this is nothing to really be so angry about and have so much angst about. For what? And for you pro-blacks out there, I don't understand something. You're so pro-black, but you're mad about a white person being a white person. If they're as racist as you say that they are, why are you so mad about a person being exactly what they were born to be, according to your logic? Shouldn't you just keep on living, fighting the power, if you will, trying to advance your own people and getting away from white people? Why are you so gung-ho about this YouTuber being racist when, quite frankly, you yourselves don't give a shit about white people? Remember, white people are going to do what white people do. Some pro-blacks, they realize that and they just say, fuck it. It is what it is. I know that, hey, if that's the way they think, what can I do about it? And they go about their business and they try to help their own people. But some of you all dwell on this shit so much, it's become your life, quite frankly. Become your life so much that you sit here and talk about even your own people. And you'll call them coons because you'll say, oh, they're defending the white man. They're defending a white woman. They're making excuses for Pearl. Oh, I done heard all of it. They're making excuses. And anyone that feels this way, they're not going to have nothing. They're not going to do this. They're not going to do that. So let me get this straight. And this thing about the coon sell out, all this shit. It's funny. If you go to, and I'm going to give you all a more academic source. You go to an article written by Ferris State University. It talks about the caricatures that were used by the slave masters towards black slaves during chattel slavery. Black people get this so wrong about that whole coon phase. It's not even funny. You know, they say, you know, because you're defending the white man, you're a coon, house Negro, boot licking, Sambo, da 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 da. So, okay, great. I'm a coon. So let's put this into perspective. Coon, according to academic sources written by Ferris State University, basically said that coon was a caricature that was established by the slave master because he did little to no work. He was lazy. He found ways to try to get around working by faking illnesses, doing little to no work. If he was working, it was poor work. And quite frankly, he didn't have any vision to continue being a slave. He would also try to find a way to run away from the slave master. And when he was caught, he would be beaten. But at the end of the day, he would always find an excuse to not try to be better, right? To not try to be a better slave, if you want to call it that. He was lazy. He didn't want to do anything. And ultimately, it's reasonably so. The man was working 12 hours a day. And because he didn't do what the slave master wanted him to do, the slave master called him a shiftless, visionless, lazy, good for nothing. You know what that word is. He was a good for nothing that. With that being said, coon was not a sellout. Let me reiterate that. Coon was not a sellout. Coon was lazy. Coon didn't have a vision. Coon didn't want to be a slave. Coon didn't want to work. He didn't want to work it because he was already too tired from all the work the slave master put him through. Some slave masters did their slaves so bad. Some of them had boils on the soles of their feet. Some of them could barely walk. Some slave masters purposefully worked their slaves to death because they wanted to go buy new ones. It was so bad. Coon was one of them. But when the United States started to outlaw slavery, the slave masters realized they couldn't do the methods they were doing before, so they slowed it down. Coon was not a sellout of his own people. And it's weird when people talk about Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom, as you all, I'm sure you know, but you want to pretend like it's not the case. But we use it as a racial epithet against black people when suddenly they defend whites, apparently. That's what we call it. When white people can defend themselves, black people don't have to do shit for white people as far as I'm concerned. With the defense shit. White people, I'm sorry, black people are not these coons that you speak of. They're not these coons that you speak of just because they have a difference of opinion than you do. But yet we want to sit here and we want to call all these different black people who don't agree with the pro-black perspective, these coons and sellouts, and the black community. That's why the black community doesn't like them. That's why the black community will hate them forever and ever. All this bullshit. It's funny. So, granted, black people are coons. So what does that make a black person who then sells out another black person by basically defending black people who are criminals? Because we have black people that do that too. So if I'm a coon for defending a white person who wasn't being racist, or defending a white person because they weren't in the wrong, what does that make you who defend black people when they do criminal minded shit or when they do harm to their own people? Are you a sellout? Are you a coward? Because as much passion as you have for black people who defend white folks, you don't have that kind of passion when black people kill black people concerning black people's lives. You have every excuse in the world for why they are the way that they are. And you will also add white supremacy into that. But yet, you won't hold Pookie and Ray Ray accountable, but you want to hold Brad accountable all the time. So what does that make you when you want to kiss ass? Because that's basically what this is. When you want to kiss ass for the black man who's not innocent versus the white man or woman who is innocent. Because if I'm kissing his ass for being honest and not actually being racist, then what are you doing? When that man went out and he was trying to kill another black man, but instead he ended up shooting mistakenly, he went and shot a child in the neck. And that child ended up going into the hospital with critical condition. What does that make him? Is that not the sellout that you all are talking about? But the person that has a difference of opinion is? I don't get that. And quite frankly, I don't think Just Pearly Things is wrong for interviewing this man because he has this radical view that everyone hates him for. Everyone has a view. And we put them on to these things because we want to know why. And we want to give the world the reason of why. I don't see a problem with that. So I'll leave it right there. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a long video, 43 minutes. Wow. I will never do this again. But my name is Malik Washington. I hope you survived through this of me talking for 43 minutes. I pray for you all. I pray for your ears. I hope this wasn't too boring for you. Have a good day, a good night, wherever you reside. I thank you for listening. If you got this far, like, comment, and subscribe to this channel if you enjoyed the content that I bring out. I will not do a video like this again unless it is absolutely necessary. So I apologize for this 43 minutes. I hope you made it through. If you did, congratulations. If you didn't, well, hey, you won't see this. So I will say that. But peace, people. Love you all. Have a good one.